Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk about Rachmaninoff, and in particular, I want to focus on the fact that it was on this week in 1943 that he died. Now, I don't usually pay much attention to dates like that, but in Rachmaninoff's case, I think it's important because Rachmaninoff was someone who was born in one world, both in a literal and metaphorical sense, and died in a very different one. And yet his music remained utterly consistent throughout his life. He was the lost of the Mohicans, the lost of the pure romantics who never really decided to introduce even a modicum of modernism into his music. Now, when you look at people like Scriabin, who composed in the late 19th and early 20th century. In many ways, he was the greatest modernist of all and the logical conclusion of Romanticism. He had one foot in both doors because he said, blow the doors off. I'm going to make my own rules. And in so doing, he was ultra modern in the way he conceived and composed his music. But at the same time, there were inviting and warm and emotionally and tonally romantic elements of his music. And even though he was probably the best example of someone who had romantic elements in modern music, other composers like Richard Strauss, yes, a late romanticist, but also someone who could be very modernistic in his sensibilities while always having very romantic resolutions to various dissonant things going on at the time. People of a younger generation like Aram Khachaturian, a modernist, but very much within a romantic framework, romantic modernism, you could call it. Ultra modern, in fact, but the fact that it was warm and had great harmony and stayed away from the more experimental modernism associated with the Second Viennese school, your Schoenbergs, your Weberns, your Bergs. I would say Khachaturian again, he straddled both of those horses. Rachmaninoff attempted to do no such thing. I mean, even Glazunov, a romantic who lived well into the 20th century, even he composed a concerto for saxophone, something that would be somewhat anathema to a true romantic. Rachmaninoff, by contrast, was a pure 19th century romantic, even though he composed and lived well into the 20th century. Now, the fact that he was able to do that as the world around him changed so much really is a sign, I think, of both bravery and devotion to his artistry. Consider this: he was born in a Christian traditional Russian state that he had to flee when it was taken over by atheist communists in the Bolshevist Revolution. He then came to an entirely different country in an entirely different part of the world, the United States, but he remained so productive, recording all of his major works, much of it with the Philadelphia Orchestra. He played with Stokowski, played with Ormandy. And to remain that consistent to your musical ethos when music around you was changing. I mean, by the time he died, the world was introduced not only to the men who were both romantic and modernistic, but also to people like Bartok, people like Kodaly, people like Stravinsky. And yet Rachmaninoff remained Rachmaninoff throughout all of that. Some might say it's being a stick in the mud. Some people might say it's averse to adaptation, but I think it does show a remarkable devotion. And it is just interesting to hear music that sounds both out of place in its era, but still so popular, because Romanticism was, after all, and still is, the most popular era of European orchestral music and solo art music. No other era comes close to filling concert halls with that amount of patronage. And maybe Rachmaninoff made a business decision. I don't think so. I think what he did by remaining consistent, interestingly, aligned with public taste. Because while the music world changed, the public never really fell out of love with Romanticism. The critics did. The public did not. And maybe there's something to be said about sticking to what you believe in, as Rachmaninoff did. That's what I think. Let me know what you think. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.